So in preparation for the new generation of GPUs around the corner, I decided to expand my benchmark stack, and one card that I picked up was AMD's RX 570. Now this card and its predecessor, the RX 470, have a bit of a weird history because of the whole cryptocurrency mining rush. The RX 470, in my opinion, was one of the best GPUs that AMD has put out in recent times, and was really the only card from their lineup to consistently beat what Nvidia had to offer at the same price range, which was the GTX 1050 Ti. Cryptocurrency changed that significantly though, and it's the main reason why I uploaded this video, where I talked about why the 1050 Ti was a much better option than the RX 470, because the RX 470's prices had been spiked up quite a lot. By the way, that video is one of my most popular with almost 500,000 views, so it definitely interested quite a few of you. However, the cryptocurrency mining craze has died down significantly, with Bitcoin now down to 6,000 USD from its all-time high at $20,000 per coin, and Ethereum is also down to 300 from its all-time high of around 1,400. Now this has done two positive things for the market. The first one is that a lot of cryptocurrency miners are selling their cards in bulk, and usually for a pretty decent price as well. The second thing is that common mining cards like the RX 570 have become more abundant in terms of shelf stock, which means that pricing is a lot more competitive among retailers. Using the RX 570 as an example, it launched in April last year at $169 US, but then price started to climb immediately to the point where in April this year, finding one under 350 was near impossible. Today though, they can be had for a little over $200 US, and I'm guessing that price will fall closer and closer to MSRP as time goes on. And if you're lucky, you can get your hands on one for around 170 with a mail-in rebate. Now, having said all that, should you be looking to buy an RX 570 since the price has come down? I mean, I just said at the start of the video that new GPUs are on the way. Now, if you haven't been keeping up with all the rumors and whatnot, Nvidia are planning on releasing the 2080 Ti and the 2080 in a couple days, but you probably won't see budget cards and competitors to these cards until the end of the year. At least that's what they did with the 10 series and the 900 series, which means that the competitors for the RX 570 will remain to be until at least the end of the year the GTX 1050, the 1050 Ti, and the GTX 1060 3GB. In terms of pricing, the 1050 Ti is almost a direct competitor at just under $200 US at the time of filming, with the 1060 3GB also at a very reasonable $200 to $220 at some retailers, and the GTX 1050 is also starting to approach MSRP at around $120 at the time of filming. So if you are in the market for a budget card, let's take a look at which one of these will be the best option given their current pricing. Let's start things off with PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and since these are budget cards, I have restricted the testing to 1080p resolution at around high settings. Here there was quite a disparity between performance. The GTX 1050 here was not able to maintain 60 FPS on average, and since this game needs a bit of optimization, the 1% and 0.1% lows suffer a little bit across the board. The RX 570 does fill the gap between the 1050 Ti and the 3GB GTX 1060 though, but the 1060 is the much better choice if you can get it at a good price. And that theme starts to set in. The GTX 1060 is way ahead here, able to push 110 FPS on average in Fortnite, with the RX 570 and 1050 Ti around 79 and 74 FPS respectively. The GTX 1050 was much more playable here, I will add, so if you don't mind medium to low settings in this game, you'll probably get away with just the 1050. In Rainbow Six Siege though, the tides do turn for the Radeon GPU, as it's now able to edge out the 3GB GTX 1060 with an average FPS of 88.5, and it's also leading the 1050 Ti by almost 50% for the same price. Pretty unreal. The 1050 Ti does catch up though in GTA 5, or rather there isn't a massive difference between the 1050, 1050 Ti or RX 570 in this title, but stepping up to the 3GB GTX 1060 will net you a much better playing experience with an average FPS of over 100. The results are much more spread out in Ghost Recon Wildlands, with fairly even jumps between each GPU. The GTX 1050 suffers a ridiculous amount here, with 0.1% lows far below the rest of the stack, and this was even after testing this title with lower texture settings, given that 2GB of video memory to accommodate some testing. Overwatch played quite well, and here we're testing frame rate in a 5-minute round in a bot match, so there might be some margin of error here even when taking the average of 3 rounds. The 1060 3GB takes the lead here as you would expect, with the RX 570 roughly 10% lower here, but with a stronger 0.1% of frames. In Battlefield 1, the RX 570 has the strongest 1% and 0.1% frame rate results in the stack here, a considerable amount better on average also against the 1050 Ti, and not too far behind the 3GB 1060. The Radeon GPU proves itself again in Witcher 3 when compared against the 1050 Ti, but it isn't enough to catch the 3GB 1060, which is a really outstanding performer here. Granted, you can get it at a decent price. In Civilization 6, we're recording average and 1% FPS results using the built-in graphics benchmark, and here we can see very similar results to the rest of the games that we've tested, with the 3GB 1060 leading by a considerable amount again. And lastly, The Division shows again the 1060 leading, but the more interesting metric here is the margin between the RX 570 and the 1050 Ti. This is what surprised me the most when looking at their current pricing, and when looking at the average of all 10 games, the Radeon GPU is the much better option against the 1050 Ti. In fact, the 1050 Ti is a hard sell at the moment, full stop. Yes, it's over 17% faster than the vanilla 1050, but it also costs you 60% more at the time of filming. At the same price, sometimes lower, the RX 570 is a much more compelling option, yielding over a 28% faster average frame rate over the 1050 Ti. If you can squeeze just a little bit more cash though, stepping up to the 3GB 1060 will net you another 17 or so % on your average FPS. The video memory is 25% lower at 3GB, but that's only going to be an issue for those playing games with demanding texture packs or ramping textures up to Ultra, which I doubt many of you will be doing with these cards. So looking at current US pricing, the RX 570 is a clear steal over the 1050 Ti with almost a 30% margin between them in favor of the RX 570. The conversation then becomes 4GB RX 570 versus 3GB GTX 1060, and it really depends on the pricing in your region. If pricing does look anything like the US pricing does right now, where the GTX 1060 3GB is about $20 to $30 more than the RX 570 4GB, I would personally be throwing in that extra $20 to $30 for that extra 15 or so % of performance on the 1060. The GTX 1050 is also a very compelling budget option at the moment, as pricing is starting to approach that MSRP of around $100, and you can pick one up for around $120, $130 these days. Performance isn't too far off the 1050 Ti as well, about 15 or so %, but you don't want to spend that extra 60% like we just said. As always guys, let me know what you think of these results, and if you're planning on picking up any of these cards, feel free to check them out in the link below, or perhaps you're waiting for what Nvidia does next. I sure am. Can't wait to see the performance of those new Turing GPUs, but like I said, we probably won't see any budget competition until towards the end of this year. As always guys, a huge thanks for watching, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you all in the next one.